Welcome to a deep dive, folks. One that's going to be quite the ride. We're diving into, well, Orlando Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Former child star, from That's So Raven.
Mm-hmm.
And lately, he's been in the news, but not exactly for, the acting.
Right. More for these pretty wild interviews and claims he's been making.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've got one of those interviews, one that's really no holds barred. He does not hold back.
Yeah, you get the sense listening to it that he's really trying to say something. It's raw, unfiltered.
And that's what makes it fascinating, right? We're not here to, make fun or anything.
No.
But to try and understand what's going on beneath the surface.
It's about deciphering, right? Like, is this guy putting us on, or is there something more, something he's trying to communicate?
I'm leaning towards something more. Like, right away, he says this thing levels to this. Basically meaning he acts different depending on who's watching, who's paying.
Ah, interesting. So there's an awareness of performance.
Yeah. Almost like he's saying, you want high, Orlando, I'll be high. You want drunk, I can do drunk.
Which is kind of unsettling when you think about it. Like, is that a choice, or is it a response to how he's being perceived, treated, used even?
Exactly. And then mixed in with all of that, he keeps talking about the Holy Spirit, like it's guiding everything he does and says.
Okay, so we've got performance, and now a spiritual dimension. This is where it gets complex, because then come the accusations.
Oh, yeah. The accusations, he names names, goes on about this whole conspiracy theory web.
Like, who would have thought we'd be talking about Janet Jackson in this context?
I know, right? But he claims, straight up, Janet Jackson, I.S. Diddy.
Whoa, okay. What else?
He says Nick Cannon is actually his wife, Danielle. Claims Bow Wow's mad at him because they,
Oh, boy, all right. This is getting pretty out there.
It is. And there's more. Raven-Symoné, he says, replaced him on their show with a clone.
A clone. Wow.
And it gets even more tangled. He says Jaleel White, Urkel from Family Matters.
Yeah, I remember him.
Is his uncle and sabotaged his career.
Man, this is a lot. You could listen to this and just be like, okay, this guy's lost it. But I don't know. I hesitate to write it off completely.
Right. It's like, what if there's something there? Even if it's just his perception of the industry, his truth.
That's what's compelling, right? This window into how he sees the world, especially Hollywood.
And he keeps coming back to this idea of selling your soul to make it.
Yeah, that there's a cost, a compromise you have to make.
Like your values, your identity, it's all on the line.
Which, let's be honest, isn't a concept totally foreign to the rest of us. We all make compromises, put on masks.
Totally. But imagine that pressure times 1,000 when you're in the spotlight, constantly being watched, judged.
No, absolutely. The public eye can be brutal.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. Because Orlando's story, as wild as it seems, makes you think, what is truth?
Big question, right? Especially in this day and age where everyone's got a platform, reality's so curated.
Exactly. And then there's the mental health aspect. He's hinted at struggles in the past, and his behavior definitely raises some red flags.
Which is a good reminder, I think. Behind all the fame, the persona, there's a real person there.
A person with their own struggles, their own way of making sense of the world.
And, we can't always expect those ways of coping to be conventional.
Right. And this is where it gets, even more out there. He goes on this whole tangent about the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
Saying its leaders, they're not who they say they are. Like hiding their true identities.
Mm-hmm. It's tricky because we're trying to unpack his story, find the meaning, but then he says things like this.
Exactly. And it makes you really consider the weight of his words, even if they might be coming from a different place,
Absolutely. It's a reminder that words have power, impact.
I mean, it feels weird to even repeat some of these claims. But isn't that kind of the point of this deep dive? To go there, even if it's uncomfortable.
I think so. It's a fine line, right? Trying to understand, but not, endorse or give a platform to potentially harmful ideas.
It's tough. Honestly, as we're going through this interview, there's that thought in the back of my head. Are we doing more harm than good by even talking about it?
It's a valid concern, but I think as long as we're approaching it critically with a discerning ear, there's value in exploring these complex situations.
Yeah, you're right. Because even with all the wild stuff, you do hear moments of, vulnerability. Like when he talks about his kids.
He clearly cares about them, wants to provide for them, be a good dad.
Yeah. And he had that health scare recently, ended up in the hospital. You can hear the emotion in his voice when he talks about it.
It's a reminder, right? This is a human being with feelings, fears, just like the rest of us.
And he talks about self-care, taking care of yourself mentally, physically, finding your truth.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like he's trying to find that balance, peace even, amidst all the chaos.
Which brings us back to identity. Is this who Orlando Brown really is? Or is he still figuring it out, trying to piece together who he is after everything?
It's a question we all wrestle with, I think. Who are we behind the masks we wear?
And how do you even begin to answer that? Especially when the world's telling you who you are or who you should be.
Exactly. And what happens when your own internal compass, the thing that's supposed to guide you, feels broken? The big question.
It's the question, man. And somehow, Orlando Brown, as out there as he is, makes us confront it. Like he's holding up this funhouse mirror, showing us a distorted reflection of our own anxieties, our search for meaning.
It's true. We're all searching for something. And in this crazy information-saturated world, it can feel impossible to find any solid ground.
Yeah, it's like he's showing us these broken pieces, and we're trying to make sense of them just like he is.
And maybe that's part of what makes his story so powerful, so unsettling even. It's like, what if these are pieces of ourselves we're afraid to look at? The doubts, the fears, the feeling of being lost.
It makes you think about the cost of fame, too. We always talk about the glitz and glamour, but
there's a dark side for sure. Especially for child stars. The pressure, the loss of privacy, the potential for, being taken advantage of.
And none of that excuses harmful behavior or words. But it does make you pause, right? Makes you consider the context.
Absolutely. We can't condone everything Orlando Brown says, but maybe by trying to understand where it's coming from.
Maybe that's where compassion comes in.
I think so, because at the end of the day, he's a human being. Flawed, like all of us, but still deserving of, basic human decency.
It reminds me of that quote, I think it's Atticus Finch. You never really understand a person until you climb into his skin and walk around in it.
That's so true. We can't judge what we haven't experienced.
And maybe that's what this deep dive has been about. Not condoning, not condemning, but trying to understand, trying to see the world through Orlando Brown's eyes, even if it's a little,
Distort.
Yeah, like that funhouse mirror we were talking about. But even in the distortion, maybe we find some truth about fame, about identity, about what it means to be human in this crazy world.
And if it gets people talking, thinking, being a little more empathetic, then I think it's been worth it.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive's been a trip, man. Thanks for riding along with me.
My pleasure. And hey, listeners, keep those conversations going. The world needs more understanding, more empathy, right?